You probably use OAuth in your app so people can log in with GitHub or Twitter or LinkedIn or Facebook, etc. And you don't have to manage their passwords and forgotten passwords and reset passwords, all that stuff. So OAuth is really, really awesome. But every time you log in during development, you're logging in with the real OAuth provider. I'm pretty sure you are. Let me know in the comments below if you're not or you found another way to do it. But if you want to log in with a different user to test something out, you may be working offline. I'm traveling today, so I'm going to have no internet on the plane and I want to work and I want to be able to log in and log out with different users and having no internet. Well, I'm going to show you in this video how to do that, but let me just show you what I've got so far. So if I click sign in, I'm using GitHub OAuth at the moment for the health check app. And if I click sign in, it's going to log in with my user. This is my real user. You can see my photo from GitHub here. But what happens if I want to log in with a different user or I have no internet? So when I click sign in to go to GitHub, it's going to say internet not found, because that's a real request. So this bit here, when you sign in, when I click this is actually going to go to GitHub. But because I've logged in already, it's remembering that I've approved the application and GitHub's returning me back to my app. What happens if I want to log in with a different user? Well, let me show you how that works and I can show you how I achieve that. So I'm going to comment this environment variable out to say that we want test mode, and that runs when I want to mock out the OAuth provider or for my automated tests, because I don't want them to hammer GitHub or any other API auth provider that you're using, because it will cost you money, because it will use your allowance and start charging more. Remember, when you've got 100 tests, you're running them locally multiple times. When it gets pushed to GitHub or GitLab, the CI is going to be running all those tests again and again and again on every commit and push. So therefore, you could use your OAuth allowance quite quickly. So now if I hit sign in, and I click sign in on GitHub, it's actually not going to go to GitHub. I'm mocking it, I'm catching that request and going to return the user that I want. And as you can see here, it's no longer my picture. Just by me changing it to test here or making the app env test, which is the recommended standard from what I understand from the community, I'm logged in as Mona. And I can actually log in as anyone that I want and have any profile picture. But I've got the Mona account because that's what GitHub have got in their docs for the API request. So I just grabbed that, but you can grab that and change it. So how did I achieve this? Well, I'm using NextJS for my project and I'm using NextAuth as well to use the OAuth providers. And I've also now included in development mode MswJS. I do have a more detailed video on my YouTube channel about MswJS and how you can mock out any API requests to another microservice or a third-party API as well. So go check that out after this video. So how have I achieved it for OAuth? Well, I have these handlers. Again, they are mentioned in the other video, but what I added was this authentication. And for OAuth, you only need to mock out 2 API endpoints. One is the OAuth provider login OAuth access token, and I'm returning an access token. And I actually got that from, again, GitHub's documentation. And so whatever OAuth provider you're using, you can get the example from their documentation. If you want to take a look at it, it just looks like this: access token, scope, and token type. So now GitHub's going to come back to our application and say this person is allowed. Great. I mean, you could turn a no as well. If you want to mock that out, you could have it to return, no, this person isn't who they say they are. It failed. So you could test out that flow as well. But we're not here to test out NextAuth. I trust that they've got their own tests, so that's working. I want to see how my application reacts to the being logged in. And so the other endpoint that we need is a user, because after the person has successfully logged in, even if it's mocked out, then we need to be able to get the user's information. So we can display it, as you can see at the top right, their profile picture and any more information you need from them. And again, I got that JSON from the GitHub docs, and you can see it says Mona and it's got their image, and you could change this to whatever you wanted as well. If you want to customize it, you could have multiple users. There's a lot of things you can do with this, which is super awesome. And that's it. That's the hard part done. There's actually one more line of code you do need to do, and that is going to be in the API file. Let me show you. If I go to source, then app, then API, and then auth, and this file is given to us from NextAuth documentation. But the extra line I had to do was, if we're in the NodeJS environment and app env is equal to test, then I want to change the authorization URL, because I actually don't want it to go to GitHub. I want it to, as if it had come back from GitHub with yes, okay, all is good. So for my app, it will seem that it's come back from GitHub with a thumbs up. And so I had to put in this bit here. I don't like a lot of dev code or test code in my production code, but after a lot of research, this was the best way to do it. And you may be thinking, well, Eddie, how do you check if we're in test mode or not? Well, actually, I'm using Next.js instrumentation file where I do check if we're in Node.js mode. I do check the app env as well. And if so, then I load MswJS's server up to mock out all the endpoints. And the great thing is, if you don't mock out any API requests, then it will show you in the terminal. Again, there's more in my other video about that, but I've also excluded some. So unmock, I'm not interested in these. If these actually go off to the real APIs, that's fine. I'm not interested in mocking those out. So I'm kind of removing those from the terminal. Otherwise it can get quite noisy and I will probably miss something that I do want to mock out. And that's basically it, really. I don't know what your thoughts are. Would you mock out OAuth? I'm actually using this more and more because it's faster. Even if I've got internet, I can be a different user. I can test it out, especially if you have authorization linked to your authentication. A different user might be an admin, one might be a maintainer, etc. and so forth. And you can then see how the application performs without doing any crazy database manipulation. You could just mock that out quite nicely. And other people working on the project can also use that too as well, which I think is great. So yeah, let me know what you think. And I look forward to geeking out with you in open source.